If you're new to incubating eggs, hopefully this video about our Mini 2 Advanced incubator will give you all the information you need to make a decision about whether this is the right Brinsea machine for you. So why would I choose a Brinsea Mini 2 Advanced model of incubator? Well, the answer is probably if I'm new to incubation, so I want a small machine to do 6 or 7 eggs at a time to get started with, and if I want an incubator that is known for the quality, reliability and accuracy so that I have a fun and safe experience of hatching. That would narrow me down to the Mini 2 Eco, the Mini 2 Advance or the Mini 2 EX. However, I'd choose the Mini 2 Advance if, firstly, I know I'm very busy or like to forget to manually turn the eggs every morning and evening. Therefore, I'm going to need a machine that turns the eggs for me. For example, if I'm a teacher and I need to know that the eggs will be turned in the classroom during the weekend, the Mini 2 Advance will rotate the eggs backwards and forwards every 45 minutes, and it'll do that as standard. But I can also change how often the eggs turn and how far my machine rolls the eggs when turning them. This is thanks to a small turning motor and a specially moulded turning disc. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I might choose a Mini 2 Advance if I might lose track of when the eggs will be hatching. So I'd really value a display that told me how many days to go before my eggs will hatch, and a machine that can stop turning the eggs automatically 2 days before they're due to hatch. So that's two. Thirdly, if I'd like to be able to see the temperature on a digital display on the top of the machine, because maybe I find it easier without my glasses compared to reading the temperature on a thermometer. Fourthly, perhaps if I'd like to set the temperature on my machine with a digital control menu and even choose whether I want the temperature to show in Celsius or in Fahrenheit, because I like using Fahrenheit, for example. Fifthly, if I want a machine with alarms that warns me if the room temperature or the internal incubator temperature is fluctuating. Sixth, if I want a machine that is able to cool my eggs periodically. For example, if I've got duck eggs. So those are all reasons why I might choose a Mini 2 Advance. Now, if I don't want these benefits of a digital control and the automation that I get from this machine, I would look at a Mini 2 Eco. If, on the other hand, I don't need the countdown to hatch facility, but I'd really like a machine instead where I can set the humidity and it will control it accurately for me, then I'd look more closely at the Mini 2 EX model. And if I want to be able to hatch more than 7 eggs, then I'd look at our Maxi and Ovation models. Most goose eggs will be too large for a Mini, and you'll need to look at an Ovation with large egg carriers if you want to hatch these. Remember that all our Brinsea incubators come with a 3-year warranty, and Brinsea offers a full range of spares and service from our factory in the UK, and we continue to service machines many years after we no longer produce them. Many of our customers have Brinsea machines that are 10 to 15 years old, and some are still using Brinsea machines that are much older than this even. So let's unpack our Mini 2 Advance. So, you get a little card firstly reminding you that you get a 3-year warranty if you register your product on the Brinsea website. So do it straight away. You'll need the serial number, which is on your box. And let me show you the serial number. That is the serial number. You can see that. Okay. You get Some important instructions. Keep the instructions safe. Make sure you check them over and read them if you can. Right. You get a top, you get a base, you get a power supply unit, you get a 7-egg disc, turning disc, you get a hatching mat, and you get a pot cover. Now, the Brinsea power adapter, always stick to this power adapter. There are plenty of dodgy imported Chinese adapters on eBay that claim to be Brinsea, which should be avoided. They may cause a hazard and they will invalidate your warranty. Set your Mini 2 Advance up in a room which doesn't have wide temperature variations. Ideally choose a room where temperature remains between 20 to 25 degrees centigrade, and never allow temperature to drop below 17 degrees centigrade, which can happen on a cold night. Place your incubator on a flat surface like this. Basically, the base is designed to trap air beneath it. So you create a layer of insulation with the air when it's on a flat surface. Don't, for example, leave it on the floor. Also, always keep the incubator away from direct sunlight. For example, don't put it in front of a kitchen window. Now, when you initially plug in the incubator, you'll get a buzzer sound and it'll start to warm up. So what I need is a bit of electric. Okay, I need to plug my incubator in. Put my this in here. We'll talk about the hatching mat in a second. Okay. So I'm going to plug my incubator in. So here is what you need to know about the digital display. When we initially plug the machine in, it will sound a buzzer and it will start warming. The asterisk on the digital display tells you it's warming up, if it's continuously visible. However, when it approaches the correct temperature, that asterisk will start to slowly flash. You'll also notice a little flashing P symbol. This appears when the machine is first switched on, but its real function is to appear as a warning if the power has been interrupted during incubation due to a power cut. To clear it, simply press the OK button down for 2 or more seconds. You are then left with T for temperature and the current temperature reading. Below this, you have the day menu, which tells you how many days remain until hatch. If we are about to start incubating hen eggs, we would normally want it to read 21 days. But for ducks, for example, you would normally set it to 28 days. Later, I'll show you how we adjust this. We always recommend that you allow the incubator to run for at least an hour before making adjustments or placing eggs in it. That gives the machine a chance to stabilise at the correct temperature and to enable you to be confident about the environment. Let's look then next at how you access the menu once the machine is stabilised, so that you can make some adjustments or simply confirm the factory settings. So we need to press the minus and plus button down once together to initially unlock the menu control, then remove our fingers after we've done this. Notice how the temperature control menu has now come up. If we want to adjust temperature control, we simply press OK once again. But if we want to move on to another menu like days left to hatch or the turning interval, then simply press the plus sign to move on to these, or the minus sign to move back between the menu headings. So let's assume we want to look at each of these menus in turn.
Let's look first at this temperature menu. To access that menu and check if the setting is what we want it or to make changes, we press OK to enter. Now it tells us that the setting is 37.5 degrees centigrade. That's the factory setting and the recommended setting for hen eggs. We have an option to put it up or down with the plus or minus buttons if we want to. Whatever temperature we decide on, we press OK to confirm it, and the digital control automatically moves us to the next menu heading, in this case days to hatch. We want 21 days. Let's go in and find out what we've got. It says 40. So let's bring the days down to 21. And OK. That brings us to turning mode. The factory setting, if we go in there, says automatic, and this means that the automatic turning will stop automatically 2 days before hatching, i.e. at day 19, given that we've programmed it for 21 days of incubation. But it also gives us the alternatives of switching the turning to on, which means the turning is constantly on until we turn it off, or to have no turning at all. So let's just look at those. Off, on constantly, or automatic. We're going to go for automatic. So that will automatically stop 2 days before hatching. The turning interval allows us to set the turning between 30 minutes and 3-hour intervals. Let's find out what the default is. 45 minutes. Let's accept the default. That takes us to turning angle. The turning angle sets the angle of egg turning by how long the turning motor runs when it turns the disc. As you can see, the factory setting is 5 seconds. What we're aiming for is roughly 1/4 to 1/2 an egg turn backwards and forwards. Now we can put a mark on the eggs when we set them to check that they are being turned adequately. Larger eggs may need longer and smaller eggs will need less time. Let's stick to 5 for the time being. Next we come to the high and low temperature alarms. In this case, the high temperature alarm. As you can see, the high temperature alarm is set to 2 degrees centigrade above the incubation temperature we have set in the machine, in this case 37.5. So if for some reason the internal temperature rises beyond 39.5 degrees, the alarm will sound and an H letter will be displayed. When that happens and we press OK, it'll silence the alarm for 30 minutes, but the alarm will sound again if the temperature is still too high. Things like leaving the incubator in direct sunlight or next to a heat source is most likely to be the reason for that alarm going off. So let's leave the high temperature alarm at 2 degrees above 37.5. So let's now look at the low temperature alarm. If the temperature falls below the low temperature limit, which in this case is going to be 3 degrees centigrade below the 37.5 target temperature we have on our machine, in other words, if it hits 34.5, then the low temperature alarm will sound if that temperature remains below 34.5 for more than 60 minutes. We'll also get an L letter appearing on the display, and that's there to tell us that we may have had a problem even if the temperature has rectified itself in the meantime and we haven't heard the alarm. So let's go with the 3 degrees. This then takes us to cooling. Some users like to introduce some periodic cooling, particularly for waterfowl, to mimic the behaviour of a duck that may leave the eggs on a more regular basis. Don't use the cooling before day 7 of incubation. The Mini 2 Advance allows you to choose a daily cooling between 10 minutes and 360 minutes, in other words 6 hours. Let's have a look what we have. The factory setting, as you can see, is currently off. There's our lowest setting of 10 minutes for cooling, and we can go right up to 360 and then off. So let's keep it on off. Finally, we have our centigrade and Fahrenheit menu, where we can decide whether to have the temperature reading in Celsius or Fahrenheit. We'll stick with the factory setting in Celsius. Celsius, okay. Finally, we need to save any changes that we've made through those menus. And to do this, we simply OK now when we have the save indicator on. That takes us back now to our display menu. So we are now out of the control menu into our standard display menu. And what we can see now is that our temperature is at 37.6, so just over 37.5, back to 37.5, and there is the pulsating little asterisk that tells us that temperature is where it should be.
So 3 of the key factors for successful incubation are the right temperature, the right level of humidity, and the turning of eggs at least twice per day. We've seen how we set temperature with the digital control menu. Let's look now into how we get the right humidity in our Mini 2 Advance. Now, eggs lose a certain amount of weight by the time the chicks hatch. If the incubator is too dry, then they lose too much weight, but if it's too humid, they won't lose enough weight. What we aim to do is lose 13% of the initial egg weight by the time a chicken egg hatches, and about 14% for duck eggs. We want to achieve an acceptable average humidity to help achieve this 13%, and it's simple to do in our Mini 2 Advance. If you look at the base of our Mini 2 Advance, you'll notice it has a central water reservoir divided into 2 pots. The new generation of Mini 2 Advance now has an external top-up facility, which means you don't have to lift off the lid during incubation at all. This is especially relevant in the 3 days before hatching. So let's pan in on this and show you how to manage the water in the central reservoir from the external top-up facility. If you look at the base, you'll notice a central water reservoir divided into 2 pots. The new generation of Mini 2 Advance now also has an external top-up, which means you don't have to lift off the lid during incubation. This is especially relevant during the 3 days just before hatching. So to get the right humidity for the first 18 days, you fill only one of the central pots, and that'll give you the 40 to 50% humidity that is normally advisable. To do that, I top up the water, but keep the water just below the little marker that's on the edge of this external water pot here. So the depth of the water in the external fill pot here tells you how much water is in this pot in the central reservoir. Now I would top up this every day or so. When we come to hatching, what we then need to do is to top up the other side as well. And the way we do that is simply to make sure we top up above the little marker here. So now I'm going right above it.
Now that will keep dropping down, and you'll see here the water is about to go over the central reservoir. Keep topping it up, and there it goes. Now it's starting to flow over. Now you'll see that that water in the external pot will keep dropping, and every time it drops and hits the top of that marker, we can suspect that we can add some more water to it. Every time you take the lid off, the humidity level will drop, so we don't want to lift the lid to inspect eggs at less than 6-hourly intervals if at all possible, just to help maintain that humidity, and that's especially the case during the hatching period. So when we add water here and we see that the water is not dropping below the little marker on this side of the external water reservoir, we can be confident that both sides of the central reservoir now have water in them. And we can just keep topping that up on a daily basis to ensure that we have water on both sides during the hatching period. Make sure during the hatching period that we put our pot cover back on to stop our chicks from drowning after they've hatched.
So how do we go about setting our eggs in a Brinsea Mini to Advance incubator and ensure they are turned properly? Well, the Mini to Advance will accommodate 7 hen eggs of different sizes with a standard 7-egg disc. Some larger duck eggs may be too big for the disc and would be best turned manually. For quail eggs or pheasant eggs, there is a 12-egg disc, which is an optional extra. Bantam eggs probably will be too big for the quail egg disc. It will depend on your bantam eggs. Before you put your eggs in the Mini to Advance, make sure the machine has run for an hour or so the temperature and humidity have stabilized. You need some fertile eggs from a reputable breeder that are not older than a couple of weeks, otherwise they may not be viable, and they need to have been stored either by you or whoever's got them in a cool environment, around about 10 degrees, preferably not a fridge. The egg disc needs to be placed with the ridges of the disc facing upwards, or the eggs won't be turned properly. Note that on the Mini to Advance, you need to keep your hatching mat for hatching only. Don't try and put your hatching mat under your egg disc. Now, we want the eggs to rotate backwards and forwards between 90 and about 120 degrees in total. And that's what your automatic turning will do for you.
To test how well your eggs will roll, place the eggs, I suggest, with an X on their shell, all the eggs, with an X on their shell in the incubator, and instigate a turn. And just see whether you're getting a good turn on the eggs. Some eggs will prefer to sit pointy end facing outwards, particularly the bigger eggs, and some, particularly the smaller eggs, will prefer and roll better if they're sat with a pointy end facing into the center of the incubator. You may find also that if you've got big eggs, you need to increase the turning angle by going into the turning menu on your Brinsea Mini to Advance and increasing, say, from a 5-second turn to a 8-second turn for bigger eggs. When you've done that, you can then mark up your eggs with a 0, and you should then see something a little bit like this. I've got these 2 eggs as demonstration marked up, and when I instigate a turn now, you'll see that a 0 should come back up to the top as they roll. So these are slightly bigger eggs. These are on I think it's an 8-second turn, and you'll see that they have turned quite well. In fact, this egg, which is a duck egg, might be better off facing the other way. So let's now talk about candling and what to do at hatching. From about day 8 and certainly by day 11, you can check that you have viable embryos by candling the eggs with a candling kit like this one. This is an overview candler, and this is called an overscope. So we place our overscope over our candler. We take an egg from our incubator, place the egg pointy end up inside the candler, put our lid back onto the overscope, make sure it's turned on, and we view down the eyepiece. We rotate, there's a little disc here, we can rotate the egg. The candler magnifies the image and rotates the egg at the same time. So day 8, what we're looking for, and especially by day 11, day 8 maybe not so clear, by day 8 we should be able to see some vein formation. By day 11 we should be able to see a kind of dark mass of the embryo developing. If we have a clear egg, or if we have a blood ring, then the chances are we haven't got a viable egg in there. The blood ring would indicate the embryo has died. We can repeat the candling every 3 days up to day 18, just before we go into lockdown for hatching. As we've already described at the start of day 19, for hatching hen eggs on day 21, we need a high level of humidity. So what we need to do is make sure our 2 central pots are topped up by filling up the external reservoir. On day 19, we also need to make sure the turning has stopped. Now, if you've got auto turning on here, it will automatically stop. If not, you'll need to make sure you turn it off yourself. And we need to replace the turning disc with our hatching mat. So let's take our eggs out and replace with our hatching mat. Okay. The ridges of the hatching mat, as we've described, also help to keep the eggs from rolling around and provide grip for the chicks when they do eventually hatch. Basically, the high humidity helps prevent membranes drying and hardening. And if they do dry and harden, they can inhibit the chicks from breaking out of the eggs. Okay, so once the chicks start hatching, you can leave them in the incubator for up to a couple of days before then transferring them out under a heat source. So set yourself up a cardboard box, make sure you got some water, some chick feed, chick crumb, and some kind of bedding. It might be newspaper, it might be some other bedding you can purchase, and you need one of these or an equivalent. This is our EcoGlow 20. It's also called an electric hen or a brooder. The chicks will gravitate to the source of warmth. This is a heating plate underneath. It doesn't get too hot on this particular model, so it means the chicks can actually go right up against that heating plate, and they do love this. And with that in place, you will successfully rear your chicks after they get out of the incubator. So all you need now to do, once your eggs are out, they've hatched, is to take care to clean your machine so that it's nice and clean for the next hatching project you have. Now, obviously, when you clean your machine, always disconnect the incubator from the mains. Don't put any parts of your incubator in the dishwasher or in liquids over 50 degrees centigrade. Wash the base in water with a disinfectant. We recommend our Brinsea disinfectant. That's very concentrated. You only need 1 part disinfectant per 100 parts of water, which in simple terms means 1 teaspoon per
pint of water or 1 teaspoon per half a litre of water. So use that solution to clean and wipe down all parts of the incubator. Give the lid a gentle hoover out to get rid of any dust from hatching. And then run your incubator dry for a couple of hours after you've cleaned it, so that it really dries all the parts out before you store it away. And then really that's it. If you've enjoyed using your Mini 2 Advanced Incubator, please do share your experience with us. We appreciate any video clips or photos that you send to us at sales@brinsea.co.uk. And we might even use your clip or your photo on one of our future newsletters or on our website. Thank you.